Good afternoon, everyone. We are very, very excited to have Jean Colner with us today. She is the newly retired former director of the Children's Dyslexia Center here in Columbus, Ohio. And she has had so many amazing experiences that we want to discuss with her today. She goes way back to our home city, and we're just going to spend some time talking with Jean about everything Orton-Gillingham. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us, Jean, just about your background before we begin?
Well, it's interesting. My personal connection with you, Brett, goes back to when your group was forming the UA Kids. And I was contacted because I had tried to do a similar thing years before when my firstborn was in Upper Arlington, and I was questioning how they were teaching reading and spelling, and I was getting the answer, well, we have bigger problems than your child. He's a really great kid and he'll be fine. And I'm like, but we want him to reach his full potential, you know? But I had known the James family because I had been speaking out about the reading curriculum, and I didn't know about the research. It was still being developed at that point in the late 90s. But I spoke out at meetings, and I was on some state and local task force groups about parent involvement, because I thought, well, that might be the angle. If parents had more say in their school committees, perhaps we could have some influence there. So anyway, I spoke out at it must have been an Arlington board meeting, and one of the Jameses heard me. They must have been there. And I got a call from the first director here at this center as they were forming it, and she was from Connecticut, and she came in. She was a fellow in the academy, and she said, would you like to be trained in Orton-Gillingham? And I said, I don't know, maybe. What is it? That was the beginning. So that was, I was in the first class, and I just absolutely loved it because it made sense to me. And I thought, this is what all kids need. Mm-hmm. It just simplifies the language, and we don't have to guess. And there's a reason for things, and it just expanded my world. And at that time, I had actually come from the arts field in my professional life, and then I was home with my kids, and so I began a second career in this, and I just stayed with it and realized that you never finish learning, and went on to become the director in 2004 because Nancy James Jr., who was at that time the director, had moved, and there I was. We had to keep it going, so I had to scale up and learn how to be a presenter and how to be a director, and I've been here for years, and what I realized, Brett, was there's not enough of us. Mm-hmm. We have to have more people that can train and supervise and mentor. And in the early days, we couldn't get enough people to take the training. We would put little ads in the paper. We would send packets to every school district that I don't think they were ever opened or read, inviting people for free training, because this was all by scholarship based on the philanthropy of the Masons.
Okay.
Yeah, it was all. It was a project for free tutoring for children, and so if we could train the teachers and give them this practicum that they would need to be fully and well trained, then the children could have the opportunity to have lessons at no cost to families. So that was a mission of the Masons. It still is.
How did they become aware? How were they so much farther ahead than the education community?
That's a great question. Mass General Hospital in Boston in the 90s, mid-90s, early 90s probably, there was a wonderful woman there named Phyllis Mizell who was involved with a clinic for teaching Orton-Gillingham, training people. And she was one of the founders of the Academy of Orton-Gillingham Practitioners and Educators, and IMSLIC. the International Multisensory Structured Language Education Council, long word, but she was a pioneer in the field. And she knew some Masons that had, I'm assuming, grandchildren that were dyslexic, and spoke to her. And they had been doing schizophrenia and the burn victims and other charities. And there was then a movement to start this dyslexia program so that children could have tutoring at no cost, because private tutoring is very expensive, as you know.
Yes, I've paid it.
Yeah, many of you have, and it's really been an amazing place, because it's in, let me think, maybe 16 states, might be down to 11 states now, in the northeastern part of the United States, which is called the Northern Jurisdiction. So they took this project on, and they would go to all the local Masonic boards in these states and see if they were interested. And then they began fundraising, and we opened our doors in 1999, had our first student in 1999 here. And we began the training process. And as I said, we couldn't find classes. We couldn't find people interested, because people didn't know.
Yeah.
You don't know till you know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So what happened over the years, I started getting, the staff we've had has been so fantastic. There's a wonderful culture here of learning and supporting. And I always say, when we're in the back of this office building where the Masons have their front office. And as I see teachers that have worked all day in their public school or private school, and they come through those doors and they walk back into the center, you can almost see the stress melting off of them.
Yeah.
And they come in with a smile, because they're going to be fully supported. Everybody here gets it. It really is about the kids and giving them what they need. And so this culture has been created, and we've got people that want to be here, want to keep growing, want to expand. And we had, as you well know, we've got a couple fantastic people who are now have succeeded me here, which is Blythe Wood, who's our director, and Andrea Rowson, who is our associate director.
Yes.
And they both started about the same time, maybe 2008, I'm thinking. They've been here a long time, and they've gone through every bit of training that we've ever offered. They're first in line. They've done it. So it's funny, because they got it, because they're in the public schools. Blythe is in Pickerington. Andrea's in Upper Arlington.
Yeah, she's ours. Yeah.
Yes, and she's just amazing.
Well, and the amazing thing is that when you train them, so you train them, give them all the OG training, the practicum, and then they come to their home district. And now Andrea is the reading expert for all of Upper Arlington. And I know Blythe does that same thing in Pickerington. So what you're doing is you are then creating this whole knowledge base in a district, in a public school district, that then spreads and has huge impact.
Right. And so we knew we needed to, we couldn't expand our bricks and mortar here. We are limited. It's a clinic. It's just got 6 little one-on-one tutoring rooms, and one room we reserve for small group when we have that availability, meaning that children have to be well matched, and they have to be able to come at the same time. But we do want our people to have that experience, because we know that's what's their real world is going to be when they go back to the schools. But so we knew we wanted to impact more children as the culture grew, and the passion, the mission, we grew, and we knew we've got this fantastic opportunity here. There was a time that my former associate director, Mrs. Donna Irene, she and I used to go to the small colleges around here.
Yeah.
To try to see, shouldn't this be in a university? Yeah. And we never really got anywhere with that. The door wasn't open. We had some conversations, but that's okay. We do offer graduate credit for the course through Ashland University, and we do a lot of our training there. But as far as a master's degree that would include this, or even an undergraduate, we've never been able to break that barrier.
It's
happening in some
surprising.
places, though.
Yeah, well, and I think given the work that we are all doing right now, there is going to be some more interest in what you're doing.
Right, it's starting, and we've got, I know, King's College in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania is, they will accept, if you haven't been through an IMSLC accredited course, or you're a member of ALTA, the Academic Language Therapy Association, then you can count those training hours towards your master's. So that's been a big breakthrough in the last year. But anyway, we realized we were just desperate to get this out there for the kids. And so Blythe and Andrea, that's where they really began to develop within their districts. How could we do this? So Blythe started a little satellite in Pickerington, and Andrea was able to do that in Upper Arlington. And we also have worked with Westerville since 2014 or 12, I guess, where they send people every year. Some districts are more organized with it. We've worked with Columbus in one little elementary school.
Which one?
It's Watkins, South End, and because we have a person here. So it's really about our people that are here and their relationship with us and their school and their district.
Take a trusted contact or interaction with someone, because this is so different from what's currently being taught in the college education.
Right, still. And that's the biggest heartbreak. And Brett, we will train young ladies that are fresh out of their university with their teaching certificate. And maybe they've even gotten their master's degree, and they're in debt, paying, and they come to us and they go, why didn't anybody teach me this? Why is this all new?
Well, what when we were fighting our district, as you know, you're very familiar with how tough Upper Arlington was. When we fought the district, I actually thought that the teachers and the administrators knew and were just denying us. And I'm not saying everybody didn't know about dyslexia, but there might have been a couple who did. But the vast majority of people, and the way that I kind of got on the same side with the district and the administration after the systemic complaint, everything kind of the dust settled, was to realize that the children are losing because they can't read. Parents are losing for their children. Teachers have spent all this money at colleges of education, and they do not know how to teach children to read. And then the administration of the public school district is having to pay all this money in professional development. So really, if you can ever get your district and your teachers to understand this, you can band together with your district and your administration. And we actually took a team to meet with the president of the College of Education at OSU. And I'm not saying that he just said, well, we'll change everything, but he has heard and committed to having additional meetings, because especially the science, the colleges of education are where the science should be taught.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
And so we have these relationships, and when we used to hear, well, we can't possibly afford to send, because we realized if we're going to expand and make more of an impact, we've got to have staff. We've got to pay staff. We're going to have to charge tuition for these schools. Okay? It's a fraction of what they'd pay for a master's degree, but it's career enhancing.
What in your estimation is a cost for the training and the books for one teacher for a district to be trained in Orton-Gillingham at your center?
Well, I didn't price it out this year, so I'm not really sure what they're charging. It might be $3,500 for books and materials.
That would jive very well with
$1,000.
Upper Arlington is telling us. Say it again.
What's a master's degree? It ranges from 15 to 30 to 45 to
to 150 if you're out of state. I
Yeah.
mean, it can be extraordinary. But that's what Kevin Gorman at Upper Arlington told me last year, that it's roughly $3,500 to
Mhm.
teach someone Orton-Gillingham, which
Right.
is very reasonable. I'm
Right.
sorry.
And it's a career enhancement. It's a
Yeah,
resume changer.
yeah,
You're going to have options. And now it's so interesting because now we get calls, desperate calls from districts. We've got to have an Orton-Gillingham person.
yeah.
Do you know anybody? Well, we know a lot of people because we've trained a lot of people. It's hard, but people are busy. People are engaged. People may or may not want. So I know one district that was desperate to get an OG person this year, and we've told a lot of our people, and they interviewed, and they just said, no, I'm busy. I like where I am. So just the moral of the story is you need to train more people. You can't
Absolutely.
be, you should be prepared. Parents, and I say what's the game changer is parents and the advocates
Yeah,
have been what's really changed the playing field.
yeah.
Educated advocates, because more parents can afford an advocate than an attorney when
Yes,
they
much.
want to press their school for services.
Hmm.
And we've got some fantastic ones in Columbus.
Absolutely. Brenda Lewison included, along with many others.
Oh,
Can
yes.
you tell me a little bit? We had some questions when we did the Zoom panel right after the documentary premiere
Hmm.
about specifically about Orton-Gillingham. And so if you don't mind spending a few minutes talking about, the origins, really what is it?
Yeah.
And then what it takes to be trained with fidelity, because for all of the parents, we know that you've got to get the training with fidelity, including that practicum, to
Hmm.
get the kind of results that we want.
Right. Okay. Well, Orton-Gillingham was originated by Dr. Orton, who actually his father was the first president of Ohio State University, and Orton Hall is named after him. He was a
Yeah,
geologist,
yeah.
and he was a neurologist, and he did his work on post-mortem brains. So instead of our the films that we can take of brains now, he was working on the post-mortem brains. But he had a theory when he worked in the Iowa State Hospital that there were some really bright people that were struggling to read, and it didn't make sense to him. And they were misdiagnosed as having mental problems. So he began to work on it, and he had this theory about dyslexia. And then eventually he met up with Anna Gillingham, who was a progressive New York educator. They were doing open air schools back in the 20s. They thought everybody should have fresh air, so they would teach on the roofs of the high buildings.
Wow.
Kids would bundle up and they would go outside. But she was progressive, and she believed in this multisensory approach, which would be the tactile, the audio, and the visual, the engaging the senses in the teaching. So they got together and they developed this Orton-Gillingham approach. And so Anna Gillingham and her partner, Bessie Stillman, created this curriculum, or this scope and sequence, or this methodology. And they would go all around the country and different parts of the world even, and do these little cohorts, start the training in a city. And then they would go on to the next place. They were like traveling consultants. And then in that particular region, it's like a learning center here where you develop a culture, you keep training the next group of people, they keep training people, and then they can put a little different spin on it. Oh, let's try this. And so that's kind of how it regionally went across the country. And you had Texas had the alphabetic phonics. You had in upstate in Washington and northwest part of the country, Spalding and Slingerland on the west coast, and the Orton-Gillingham Academy was in Kildonan, New York. So you have little parts of the country that are doing basically the same thing. But So that is the Orton-Gillingham approach. And what it is, it's basically explicit, systematic teaching of phonics. And we integrate the 5 big ideas, which you mentioned, the research and the science. And this came out right when I was starting the National Reading Panel. It hadn't been published yet. We just had, paper copies we'd print off and staple together and read through it.
In the 2000, like year 2000, it was published.
In 2000, and that's when the 5 big ideas came out. They decided that the illiteracy in the United States was a national health emergency. We had to address it. So they pulled together this big panel, and they studied all the research that was available to them at that time, and to try to figure out what's really needed for proper reading instruction that would be effective. So they found out you need phonemic awareness as foundation to the phonics. And then you're going to need fluency so they're not glued to print, so that they read fast enough so that they can understand and comprehend what they're reading. And then you have, of course, vocabulary. We have to do that. We have to enhance their language skills. So we integrate all of that into a lesson, and it's all structured. The children know what to expect in a lesson, what comes first, second, third, fourth, and you know what? They like that. They want structure. They want to know what to expect, what they're going to do. So the first half of the lesson is symbol to sound, where they're seeing cards with letters, and they say the names of the letters and the sound. And then they can review whatever they learned most recently, because we have to overteach for mastery. Okay, so because a lot of our kids also suffer with working memory deficit, so we overteach. So we always review, and then we do a discovery learning of new material, so where they have to see it and hear it, and they have a tactile interaction with that concept, and they decode the words. They have to know the 6 syllable types. We teach them that, and what the vowel sounds are as you mark the vowels. We also teach the morphology, the Latin, the Greek, the Anglo-Saxon, so that that helps with the vocabulary. So that's part of that decoding process. So that's the first part. That's that association 1, we call it. Association 2 is sound to symbol. It's the opposite work. So now you're not seeing anything, you're only hearing it. So instead of seeing a card with an A on it and saying A says ah, the instructor says, what says ah? And the teacher or the student writes A says ah. And they go through the sounds, and then spelling of words, where they segment each sound and name those letters and write and spell those words. And then then there's sentences where all these concepts are pulled together. What they're reviewing for mastery and what their new concept will be in a dictation sentence. That's their challenge. And then there's oral reading, where we would work on fluency, comprehension, prosody, which is the expression of the reading. So all of that is packed into a 50-minute lesson. It's a lot to get done. And Brett, I have to tell you, these tutors now are doing it all on Zoom. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge anyway. And they've got to translate it onto Google Slides, or there's lots of apps that they're integrating, but it makes it twice as hard.
Well, you know what? That is a question that I've gotten actually a couple of times. People asking me whether OG on Zoom. I forget where this woman was from, but she was in a small city, small town, very rural. They didn't have anyone with OG, and she was trying to figure out if it was okay to do OG online. What is your opinion?
I think it's certainly better than not having it at all. It's got its drawbacks, but I have a colleague in the mountains. Are there mountains in Tennessee? There's very high hills. I mean, it's rural there, and she has requests from as far away as England to do Zoom lessons. She's been doing it a long time. That is her business.
Yeah.
So she's skilled at it. It's not as challenging as our people that are now with the COVID situation that have had to learn it.
Yeah.
And I would say for people that aren't around anybody, and there's a lot of people in rural, a lot of people aren't around anyone that's available in person. So hey, it's a good option.
Yeah. Okay. It's definitely much better than nothing.
Uh-huh.
So I will, when asked that
Mhm.
question again, I
And
know how
I
to
think it's
respond.
preferable if you have a live situation,
Yeah.
but it's not always possible.
Yeah. What you're saying sounds like it would be good for almost all children to learn.
Absolutely.
But I know that Orton-Gillingham is really reserved for mostly for dyslexic children who are pretty severe. So with other kids, you maybe phonics is enough, maybe on a daily basis, like we're doing in Upper Arlington. We just do the Wilson Foundations, 30 minutes a day, kindergarten, first, second, and third.
Yeah, that's a good foundation, that tier 1 for all kids. I think that's a great idea. But I think of kids, what about kids in socioeconomic, in poor districts with maybe second or third generation functional illiteracy, that there's not a lot of reading in the home or books? What about those kids? How
Yeah.
would they do with Orton-Gillingham? Wow, can you imagine? Especially when we get into the morphology and the ability to give them the Latin bases, which is 50% of our language, and
Mhm.
our utilitarian words that
Yeah.
we want to have children understand. Imagine if we could use these concepts and systematic and explicitly teach the concepts in the sound letter correspondence, which is phonics.
Mhm.
Even the alphabetic principle. We work on, if you can see behind me here, we have a alphabet arc. You'd be surprised at kids we get sometimes here at the center in 5th, 6th, 7th grade that really don't even know the sequence of letters. And people say, well, what, they don't need that anymore. We're not going to file anymore. Okay? We don't look things up in a dictionary anymore. But it is important.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that, it's a skill that we need, and we need the language of before and after, because when we're talking about decoding a word, we can ask the question, what sound did you hear before that final consonant? Because sometimes, our dyslexic kids, they may not know the sequence.
Mhm.
What's before, directions? Do you have a dyslexic child that gets lost?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's great. Foundations is great for those, I guess it's kindergarten, first, second. I'm not sure what grade.
We're doing it right now, kindergarten, first, second, and third. The interesting thing with us was that initially Upper Arlington used Wilson to for intervention. And the kids who were getting this intervention went back into the classroom, and a first grade teacher said, "What are you doing with this little girl? This is amazing." And so she asked to pilot Wilson Foundations for the whole class. Now we have it, kindergarten, first, second, and third, for 30 minutes a day with every single kid in Upper Arlington. And it's amazing. Yeah. And then for our more severe kids, we do Orton-Gillingham, and all of ours are trained at your site with the full practicum. Could you talk the practicum? Could you talk a
Yeah.
little bit
Oh,
about
yeah.
the
That's
importance of it?
so key, because first of all, I always say we're learning the why when we train people. Why? Okay, so when you wonder why are we doing this, we have to learn about dyslexia, the brain, the reading research, multisensory strategies, Orton-Gillingham. We have to learn why. Then we have to learn what, which is the structure of the language, which is, as I mentioned, the 6 syllable types, the sounds of all those letters, what position or what spelling generalization you would find those, where the accent and the stress would go, how you divide the words, the structure of the language. And then there's also, which also lends itself to the, as I say, the morphology, the Latin, the Greek, the Anglo-Saxon. the etymology. Where do these word parts come from? You know, why are they spelled this way? So, so that's that takes 9 months of the initial class of about 50 to 60 hours of lecture.
Yeah.
With book reports, chapter reports, quizzes, a final, you know, a lot of lecture time and interaction with the trainers. And that's really important because you have to know that. Now, the third element is we've got the why, the what, now the how. The how is the big challenge because you can learn content. You can watch it online and learn it. You could watch YouTube lectures and learn all about the structure of English and read a lot of books and you would know it. But how are you going to teach it? That's where we get into this apprenticeship model or the mentoring, the coaching, where you have somebody come alongside you that is helping you. How do you write a lesson? What should go in a lesson? If you want to teach this, how do you do it? This particular concept, like the final CK, how would you teach that? So somebody needs to help you get started and then review what you're doing and watch you, coach you. And it's like anywhere from a plumber has to work under somebody as an apprentice, and it's a brain surgeon is going to work as a resident, right?
Yeah.
And learn how to do it. You don't just absorb the content and then do it. And that's what it worries me when I know a lot of places this has gotten to be very popular and in demand, and people want a lot of people trained. But if you don't have enough supervision to really handle it, if you have to wait a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, longer before somebody sees what you're doing to give you corrective feedback, are you making your own bad habits? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You need that immediate corrective feedback. So that's why I saw at an IDA conference, I forget where, San Diego, maybe years ago, somebody had done a study on this, how do you put this into the schools and have it done right? And this was a lady, I think from SMU, this particular researcher, and she said that according to her findings, the ratio would be 15-1, meaning 15 people in trainees under one qualified supervisor, certified supervisor. And that's a full-time job. And I know that a lot of times that doesn't happen because the demand is such that the people can't get to them. Although there's a lot on the other side of that coin, there's a lot of training with really no supervision. It's all about the structure of the language. That's great. It's good to know. But I know for this to be effective and to be delivered with fidelity, you have to have a supervised practicum. So you learn the feedback and you get the ideas and you hear. What's beautiful about this clinic is we have a lot of people at different levels of expertise. So as our trainees come in here twice a week to work, they're going to have incidental learning. There'll be people looking over somebody's shoulder like, oh, I haven't even thought about that yet. And you're teaching it and they'll hear about it, or at the copy machine, or, so it's an opportunity to grow in an amazing way. But yeah, the practicum, Brett, I think is it's the key. It's the difference that makes the difference.
And is yours about 70 hours?
It's 100.
100 hours.
For the first level. God. And then 100 hours for the second level. And then there's more, in order to be a trainer, I think, is it 600 or 700? It used to be 800. I think IMSLIC lowered it a bit. But, and then we've just got accredited at the therapy level, which will be 700 hours of practicum with 200 hours of lecture.
What does that mean, therapy level?
That is going to be, that's a certified academic language therapist is one that has basically just more training, more content, and more opportunity to teach under the supervision of a certified, qualified supervisor, instructor. Yeah. So again, there's levels, there's levels. But I do think that our practitioner level that we offer here, which is 50 hours of lecture, 100 hours of practicum, minimum of 6 formal observations, but a lot of informal work with the people throughout the 9 months it's called the practitioner level, and it's a fantastic teacher. It's also called the teacher level, and it's good. I think you get enough information that you can really work with kids in an effective way.
Yeah. Well, and I would think that, because I think teachers, they're certainly not paid enough. So I'm sure, they're going into teaching to try to help kids and to try to be effective, and to one of the things that Andrea said when we interviewed her for the documentary was that before she took OG training, she wasn't sure she could help every kid, but it gave her such confidence that, the family's crying, the kids crying, everybody's crying. And she said, if I can work with your child, I am, pretty certain I can help. And that is, talk about priceless.
Well, that's the thing. These teachers that come through this have the confidence. And that's what as I say, when they walk through the door and you see the frustration, I always say, I don't live in your world.
Yeah.
Thankfully, because I just think the schools the challenges they have, and these teachers are fantastic. They work so hard. And I'm thinking, especially under this COVID, what they've all had to try to do.
Yeah.
But it's frustrating because their number of children they have to teach changes for ISs, the caseload shifts, kids are in and out. Just the demands are very challenging. But these people, they are dedicated, they want to do it. But once they have this, as they say in their toolbox, they do have the confidence and they see success. And that's why we do the progress monitoring throughout the year. We introduced that, I don't know how many years ago, because it used to be in the old school OG, you just checked off your scope and sequence. Okay, did this, check, right down the list. Well, we decided we needed to teach our people to collect data and respond to it.
Oh, important.
Right?
Yeah.
So we introduced the progress monitoring, and it's funny because we did it every 20 lessons. So we started in September, we'd do it before we broke for the winter Christmas holiday. Then we would do it again 20 lessons later, and then 20 lessons. So they did 3 of these. So we used to have people, Brett, some of the greatest, most skilled people that we have that are part of our team that I can recall that were so frustrated in our first semester because it's so hard to try to get, these people will spend 2 hours writing a lesson, these teachers that work all day.
Yeah.
And because they don't know, they're trying to, it's a lot, it's a rigorous course. So we would have people that we'd be coming up to that Christmas break and they'd be like, I think I'm done. I can't do this. I don't have time. I have a life. I have a family. I can't do it. So when we introduced this progress monitoring, one of the unpredicted benefits was that our teachers, they would go through this long, difficult first quarter or first third of the year, and they would do this assessment. Well, remember, they did it right when the child came in. Now they're doing it again 20 lessons later. And it measures phonemic awareness, phonics, high frequency words, fluency. For the older kids, we can add vocabulary and comprehension. It measures all these discrete skills. And they would see after 20 lessons that it's going up. They're making a difference. So I'll tell you what, that changed everything for, again, contributing to the positive culture, because they're saying, I'm working really hard, but it's making a difference. And then nobody was saying, I'm not coming back.
Well, and isn't that smart? It's interesting that at your center, you were following the science, and they're talking about, now progress monitoring is a part of the IEP, and you have to know what you're doing. And you were kind of on the cutting edge of all this stuff, equipping these teachers with the tools that they needed, also to really be change makers in their own district. We found that with our student services with Kevin Gorman, we started by fixing student services or intervention services, but then we kind of fixed the way reading was taught in the whole school. It's like the secret little pathway in, because people like you are teaching the science of reading.
Right. And I would say a big part of that is this charity is really what this place is. They have funded, well, I've been going to at least 2 conferences every year, national conferences, and several years ago, we expanded that to all of our supervising staff. We have a budget to send them to national conferences so that they are up to the minute on the science. And so this is just so generous of them. And we also encourage everybody to take the national ALTA exam so that they become nationally certified. Mm-hmm. And again, we offer we always have the next step. Do you want your practicum 1? Or it's called practitioner 1. Do you want to be practitioner 2? We're running that course right now. My daughter's in it, in fact. It's awesome. And then we have, do you want to learn to be a supervisor? We need to encourage more people to want to be supervisors in their district, like Andrea's and Blythe's and Jennifer's and Kirsten, and I'm thinking of Ashley, thinking of my staff right here now, that can really go in, because that's that practicum piece where you can give feedback. I see what you did. This looks good. Let me make a couple recommendations. Let's try it this way.
Well, and to be on site there and to do it within the district is going to be saving that much more time and really cement this new culture into the district.
Right. And more people will benefit, more teachers, and then more children. Yeah.
Yes. I have a guest. Yeah, I'll talk to you in a minute.
Is that your next interview?
Yes, that's my 24/7 interview. She's a senior, and they are doing something this afternoon. One of the things that I'm always I am confused. There's Agape, Alta, Imslek, blah, 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 blah. Can you, and sometimes it's hard to tell whether or not, like they're kind of weekend classes or maybe week-long classes. How do you make sure, and as a parent, when you go in there and you're saying, I need OG for my kid, how do you make sure that teacher has been taught with fidelity? What are kind of the main institutions that you're recommending that people are trained under? What are the legit ones?
Yeah, okay, well, it's when I started, I was trained under a fellow in the academy, the AOGPE, which is a more northeastern model, and that was the track I was on to go for my certification. And I've been a member of that for, I don't know, 19 years or something. And I think I'm in my semi-retirement, probably gonna drop that. But then in about 2006, all of the learning centers became accredited in IMSLC, which IMSLC accredits centers. The Academy, AOGPE, certifies individuals, and I think they do accredit centers as well. And schools, I believe Olentangy just got their school accreditation from them.
The whole district, yep.
And so IMSLC, when I started in the academy, then my fellow ended up moving back east. And I had Nancy James Jr., who I was working with, who I was going to continue on.
James' daughter?
Yeah.
When you say Nancy James Jr.?
Yes, and she was fantastic. The whole family, absolutely wonderful people.
I adore them, yeah.
Yeah. And so when Nancy left, I was like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do now. But she told me before she moved, Jean, you ought to look into this ALTA because they require a national exam.
Mm.
You know, the academy, it was all paper. You know, you do a lesson, you write every detail of it, you send it. It went to 12 different people around the country. So that's how they did their vetting. And Nancy said, I like the idea. I would like to look into ALTA. You should check it out because it's on an objective national exam, like a bar exam or a CPA exam or something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
So once we became IMSLC accredited then in 2006, which is a very rigorous, everybody that's IMSLC accredited has to meet certain standards, and they have to have a criteria of practicum and lecture hours, and it's all spelled out. And when you apply to be IMSLC accredited, you get a visit. You have to submit everything about your center. And then a volunteer group of 3 individuals come to your center for 3 days, and they interview parents, they interview graduates, current students. They observe a lecture from your team, from your presentation. They look at all your notebooks, all your manuals. They look at your financials. They look at your facility. They look at your resources. It's a really rigorous sort of an inspection, I guess. And but because then we became IMSLC accredited, I found out that if you graduate from an IMSLC accredited course, you can automatically sit for this ALTA. It was called the Alliance exam, without going through much vetting because they know you've already met all those requirements. So I said, I didn't tell anybody I was going to do it. I just went and found a proctor at Ashland because we've always had a good relationship with them. And I took the test. And I was the first person in Ohio to pass it. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm in ALTA now. Well, then, because it was mainly a Texas organization, they called me up and said, would you like to be on our board? Because they wanted to expand. So, and now we're probably in, I'd say 36 states. And we have, I think it's 17 chapters, including, Andrea is our Ohio chapter president. Wow. And I just rolled off as ALTA president. So it was such an honor to be in that role and to see this organization grow. So what does it mean to be an ALTA member? It's like IMSLC and it's like the academy. You have to your content reaches certain standards, meets those standards of language structure, and you have to have X amount of hours of teaching and practicum and observations and so on. So
parents, that either one of those 3 would signify that Orton-Gillingham tutor for their child is well trained.
Yes, I would definitely say that.
Do you have any way of what should people be leery of, or what should they ask in an IEP meeting?
Well, and I would say with anything, I would think parents would want to know, did you have a practicum? How long was your practicum? How many times were you seen by your supervisor? How much feedback did you get? How quickly did you get it? Did you wait a month to get a feedback? Did you wait 3 months to hear from your supervisor? You know, I mean, what was that experience for you? Because to me, that makes a difference.
Oh, yeah.
So, and then, then we also have Wilson, which they've done a fantastic, they've really been a great niche, or their product is certainly served a important place. Certainly, I love the foundations.
But what would you say those 2, how do they dovetail?
Foundations and Wilson?
No, Foundations and OG.
Well, Foundations is based on OG.
Yes.
Barbara Wilson, I believe, was a fellow and trained in that, probably in Boston. Maybe you probably know Phyllis Mizell.
Yeah.
Might have been trained by her. I don't know. But what Wilson has done so brilliantly is condensed it down into user-friendly manuals for teachers. So teachers don't have to have the intensity of the training because it's all there. You open the book and there's the list, and we're on 12.1 and here's my list and here's my sentences. So it really has taken the burden off of teachers that need a structured approach for their students. It's available, it's right there. Mm-hmm. They do have rigorous training. I believe Andy and Blythe have both been through practicum with Wilson. And
and that is very important. Yeah, that was very important for us too, because I will never forget the IEP meeting where I was told that we were getting bits and pieces of Wilson. And that did not work. Right. So the Wilson is a great kind of package for teachers. And the way that we use it in Upper Arlington is for every single child as a tier 1, part of the core curriculum. And then tier 2, maybe a little more Wilson. And then the tier 3 would be OG, the Orton-Gillingham, that's more flexible, more diagnostic, prescriptive to that individual. Could you talk about what does that mean, diagnostic and prescriptive?
Okay, so every single lesson that our people do, they write SOAP notes, which stands for SOAP, S subjective, O objective. So subjective is Johnny was very tired today. Johnny was at a sleepover. Johnny came 10 minutes late. Okay. O for objective, what was my plan? What was I trying to accomplish today? Okay. A is assessment. Did he get 50% right on this particular review list? Because if he did, you obviously have to teach it again, right? Yeah. And P is the plan. What am I going to do next time based on how they performed today? So our teachers can't write like lesson plans in a unit. Like I'm going to do, here's my next 10 lessons, because you don't know what you're going to teach until you see how they performed on what you taught today. Then that's what you base it on. So that's, you're being diagnostic because you're using that data. It's data collection, and you're being prescriptive for that student. So you may have a student that's in high school but they don't know, they're very low, but you've got to quickly get into multisyllabic words and get into Latin or something that's going to up the challenge level and engage that student at his level. So that's being prescriptive. So that's why it's all custom. So Wilson, especially I think at the foundation level, is just a great, this is it for everybody. This is fantastic. But as you go on into the individualized, then I think you want that flexibility.
Yeah, and it's geared toward each child's or adults' individual needs. Can you talk about working with adults who maybe never were remediated, never remediated or discovered later in life? I know that it's ideal to get kids, maybe even in preschool or in kindergarten, identified and get this really good reading instruction. I also read something recently that Louisa Moats put out, that 95% of kids can be taught to read if they're caught early and they get the proper instruction. So you have less than 5% of kids that we're having to really do this deep intervention with. So early intervention is very important. But when you have people who are older, who are not diagnosed or maybe never got the help, can OG help them?
Absolutely. And I think that the older population, or the adult, or even we've had kids here that are 18, and we don't take them past 18, but if they are getting real close to 18, we'll move them up on the wait list so we can get them in and give them a chance. Okay. And what we find is the older individuals are motivated. They know they have a big problem and they want to learn. And so you can move faster with that motivation. And
they probably have a much better vocabulary And I know the
That's
simple
word.
view of reading, vocabulary and being able to decode. If
Mhm.
you have a lot of vocabulary, as soon as you learn to decode, you know all those words, and
Yes.
so you're able to read and comprehend much more quickly.
Mhm.
But
Right.
and we've had questions about high school students. That is a question that we get a lot, is what do we do about older kids? And maybe
Right.
they are prioritized to get something like OG to just fill in very
Right.
strategically just those things that need to be, those gaps that need to be
Right.
filled in.
Exactly. And if you can enhance it with the morphology and for their reading, if they read nonfiction, a lot of times they know they're behind. They want content. Okay, you don't need to do the poetry and the novels. I mean, that's all great, but a lot of times our older kids, they really love the nonfiction or the topics that may relate to what they're studying. Yeah.
Yeah, super motivated.
Yeah.
Um, let's think. Yeah, I'm just so impressed with what you
Well,
have
it's
done
just,
and the impact
it's
you've
been a
made.
joy to be part of this, Brett, and it's been a wow. And to see what your group has done after, we've seen what the Jameses did and that there was a little fix, but it wasn't widely known. And then you guys, it's almost as though you all discovered it again and
Well,
started digging and finding out and putting these pieces together and how you all came together with that
it's
goal.
the thing that I think was so difficult for the James is that it is, and I'm sure you experience this. It's so hard to kind of fight the district and to have to realize that they don't know exactly what they're doing. You're all of a sudden learning about reading and dyslexia and the law, and to be able to have other parents to rely on. Maybe I have to take a couple days off because I have a personal issue with my own child and their IEPs. Other people can keep it moving, and
Mhm.
vice versa, and leaning on them. But to I think the group, and I also think that the district responds in a different way to a group of parents getting together.
Mhm.
When you speak at a school board meeting, or when you speak, in front of the Senate Education Committee, to represent a group is much bigger than just an individual family. But they laid the groundwork and kind of put a stake in the ground.
Right.
And boy, that letter to a stranger
Right.
was
And the fact
very
that so
powerful.
many years went by that it was sort of silent. There was
Yes.
some OG available, but you had to sort of know about it.
Well, we in kindergarten, we um, raised a flag, and we were actually scheduled to get a couple days a week in first grade, maybe 30 minutes.
Mhm.
And but one of the points that we make in the documentary is that the district's like 6,000 people, and they had 2 teachers. There's no way they could have served the students that they needed to. um,
That's why they didn't advertise it.
well, no, and boy, what you had to do to get that was a big deal. What about um, what does the continuing education look like? Because I feel like are there any OG like fellows who maybe were certified but may not be keeping up to speed, or may not? Is there any issue with?
Oh, well, that's the continuing ed, the professional development piece. And that's another reason I really liked IMSLIC and ALTA, because we've always required 10 hours per year
Okay.
of current information.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the Academy has begun that this year. They're floating it out there this year. So more power to them. That's great. It's really important because we just believe it, because we are a field that's impacted by research and science. So we need to stay abreast of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been another reason that I'm thrilled that we are IMSLIC accredited, and I've got my people all take the exam. They're nationally certified, and it's wonderful.
And stay up to date with
And they stay up to date,
10
and
hours
we
every
can do
week.
it in 9 months. We can make sure they're
Mhm.
getting, but that's because we have this great ratio.
Mhm.
We've got our supervisors probably at the most, well, Blythe and Andy and their schools as part of their job description. So they have, I would no more than 15. As I said, that's the max in our view, based on research. But here in the center, it's about 5. It can take 5 at the most.
Mhm. Wow.
Just so they might be texting back and forth through the week, FaceTiming, consulting. They're like mother hens over these people as they learn it. So it's a really quality experience.
Mhm. What do you think the holdup is? If this is based on the science and it's very effective, what is your gut on why colleges of education are not teaching this? I don't.
Oh boy, colleges of education. Well, colleges in general, I think, probably need a revamp. I know you're probably just getting ready to send somebody to college, aren't you?
Oh, I'm paying, yes, some good money to send them to college.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's important, but I don't know. I think maybe tenured people that are there that have a different philosophy of reading, which I know Andy always says there is no philosophy of reading. There shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. What's the resistance if it works? Why do we have these numbers for illiteracy in this nation that spends
Yes.
so much? And
Yeah.
I think, and it's great, Upper Arlington, you guys are fantastic, but you guys were going to get your kids the tutoring anyway. You were
Yeah.
going to hire private tutors. What about these kids in the urban areas, these poverty areas? They're not going to get a private tutor. Often, unfortunately, we don't get as many of them here as we would like because they have to have the transportation.
Yeah.
And they have to have a parent or guardian stay with them here. We've had some kids, we do get kids from Columbus, but not as many as we probably should. But
What we're hoping to do, we have, we have UA Kid, that's Upper Arlington, kids identify with dyslexia. We started OH Kid it's mostly Central Ohio, but it's growing to do kind of the whole state. And we have a member from Columbus Public, Joy Palmer. She was on that Zoom interview.
yeah.
So we're trying as a group, our nonprofit, to really boost and to support parent groups to get started. But we also feel like there is some benefit for every district that can make a change. So Upper Arlington fought hard, changed this whole district. But what it did was it kind of put the word out to a lot of the different districts around here. Olentangy's having really a lot of success. Marysville, Westerville, Columbus Public, I think, is looking at foundations for kindergarten and maybe first grade. Yeah, so we are both working to get parent groups together and to fight in their own districts to ask for these things. But also if you can turn your district, surrounding districts, it's like a ripple effect. They can also have some effect. But I would agree. It takes time and money. And Emily Hanford says, it's a rich man's sport. But we're trying to do everything we can to bring that to everyone, regardless of socioeconomic level.
Well, that's great. And I think you've got some really great leadership skills, Brett, to keep this thing going and keep pushing forward. And you're never done. You've always got the next goal ahead of you. And a lot of people will benefit as a result of that.
Well, we're trying. Well, like I said, I cannot thank you enough. This has been a long time coming.
It's been great. Yeah. Glad to know you, Brett, and thank you for what you're doing.
Well, and thank you for what you're doing, because for 20 years, you've been laying the groundwork, and increasing the knowledge and just helping so many kids. So thank you.
I've been blessed, I have to say.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.